Jesus Christ, guys, and like that, we are at 400 subscribers, and like I said in the Joker video, we're going to move away from the DC Top 10 list to celebrate. We're moving over to my main collection, that being my wrestling collection, and I figured the best way to start this off is with Hogan. Now, Hogan is not the wrestler I had the most figures of. That would probably either be John Cena or The Undertaker. That said, as you can see, I do have a whole lot of tanned buff men. I got the red and yellow, I got the green and camo, I got the black and white, I got the black and white and red, I got the red, white, and blue. I have so many Hogans, and this isn't even a percentage of all the figures he's had over the years. Keep in mind, these top 10 lists aren't based on the Hogans that have been made, they are based on the Hogans I have in my collection. That said, this is still a huge range of figures. There are more Hogans than I had Supermen, Batmen, or Jokers. So this list is probably going to be a little bit more varied, a little bit more particular to my interests and my likings of the figures. And I cannot wait. This is a top 10 list I've been really excited to get chewing on, and this is the time to do it. So, brother, let's talk about my favorite scumbag alive. The dude whose lies and constant misinformation keep me alive, keep me going. The dude who is so much more performance than wrestler that the guy was able to keep going until he literally couldn't walk anymore and there was no discernible difference. Let's talk about the one and only Hulkamaniac. I adore my wrestling collection so much. I really do. And I'll be honest, for the first many years of collecting, I actually refused to buy Hulk Hogan. I was a teenager, I was in that whole, oh, Hogan ruined the wrestling industry kind of phase, like, a lot of wrestling fans get into. But ultimately, I respect what the guy did for the business. I think he actually is an incredible performer. I'm always happy to see Hogan come back, and at this point, I'm always excited to see a new Hogan figure on the shelf. I really do love getting figures of this guy because, kind of like your Optimus Primes or your He-Mans, he is the main character. Mattel or Jakks or Hasbro, whoever's doing the figures at the time, always give Hogan that little thing, that little something special, because they know he's the one that's going to be bringing in some serious paydays for the toy line. With all that said, I want to get into my top 10. These are just the top 10 Hulk Hogan figures that I personally own. As you can see, I definitely have a pretty big Mattel bias, but I do have some representation from LJN, Hasbro, Toy Biz, even a Jakks in the back. So I think this is going to be a pretty varied collection lineup, especially when it comes to looks for this guy. So let's get straight into this, my top 10 favorite Hulk Hogan action figures. Number 10, Mattel Survivor Series 2021 Hulk Hogan. It feels only right that we start with the figure that ended my Hogan embargo, that being the Mattel SummerSlam 2021 Hulk Hogan. Now you see, he was in a wave with a Bret Hart. Bret Hart, of course, being my favorite wrestler of all time. So what I was going to stores trying to find was Bret, and yet I kept coming across Hogan, and every time I looked at him and I thought, wow, the skin tone looks perfect. He has those pinless double-jointed elbows now, the rip-away shirt. And then I finally bit the bullet. And I'm so glad I did, because this figure is spectacular. If you just want like a generic Hogan, a normal Hogan that can fit any collection, any display, this is the guy. His shirt is a Hulk Rule shirt. Dupe. So let me get that up. So this is more of a 90s Hogan as opposed to like an 84, like late 80s Hogan. And I love the headband. I even love the head sculpt. It's very goofy and cartoony. There's definitely better head sculpts on the list that Mattel have done for Hogan in recent years. There's something about just how silly this one is that I like. With all that said, it's definitely one of the weaker of the Mattel Hogans, because if you guys aren't aware, Mattel has been knocking it out of the park with their Hulk Hogan figures these last 2 years. But this was one of the first reintroductions of Hogan to the Elite line, and it's one that really stands out to this day, especially with it being one of the few Hogan figures that Mattel's done to have the right skin tone. They're getting better about it, but there's a lot of figures that unfortunately are brought down by being just a bit too pale. Number 9, Mattel Superstars Hollywood Hogan. The Mattel Superstars line, the bane of my existence. Not because I don't like the figures, quite the opposite, I love them. No, they're the bane of my existence because they never show up. They are so hard to get, and it's ridiculous. It's made me not want to collect them. But at the very least, when I do get them, they are quality. This NWO Hogan was from Wave 1, and aside from Honky Tonk, I think he's the standout of Wave 1. All of this is just so good. The colors are great, the accessories are wonderful, the proportions awesome. They even have things like his Hollywood NWO painting down here on his boots. It's so cool to see a Hogan this stylized that still has so much care put in. That said, that stylized is also a very divisive aesthetic for this figure and for this toy line in general. You either love or hate the fact that they're these Remco-inspired He-Man Origins bodies. Me, I love them, but I can definitely see a lot of collectors needing to pass them over just because they're a bit too cartoony. I totally respect that, but I'd also be lying to say that this guy isn't on my top 10. Number 8, Mattel SummerSlam 2023 Hulk Hogan. Number 8, we have the newest addition to my Hogan collection, that being the SummerSlam 2023 Hogan. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a look that Hogan very briefly adopted when he was fighting Sergeant Slaughter. Now, you see, Sergeant Slaughter was an Iraqi sympathizer during the Gulf War, and he had teamed up with Saddam Hussein. They were like doing parades together, and then he burnt the American flag at the Royal Rumble, screwed over the Ultimate Warrior. So Hogan was like, "No, brother, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna go drink Iraqi children's blood." And if you think I'm exaggerating, no, I'm not. He literally called for like the death and destruction of Iraqi families. It's not a good time for wrestling history. It's not a good time for human history. But at the very least, Hogan had some, questionable attire. This really feels like, if you're a WCW fan, when Booker T became G.I. Bro, and it was kind of like a send-up to like the G.I. Joe aesthetic, that's what this feels like. And of course, Sergeant Slaughter was a G.I. Joe character before he came back for this run, so I always wondered, did Hogan dress like this just to make fun of that, or was this what he thought soldiers dress like? And yeah, it's Hogan in like a military Jason mask and an American flag bandana, but hey, it's unique. It's definitely unique. Number 7. Toy Biz WCW Wolfpack Hogan. 7 was tough. You gotta remember, I have 26 Hogans, and I like all of them, and I had to get it down to 10, and this was honestly the choice I had the hardest time with, because I didn't want both of my WCW Toy Biz Hogans on the list. And I tried to convince myself I like this one more just because it looks more evil, even though this is supposed to be a good guy Hogan. But no, that'd be a lie. My favorite has to be their version of the Wolfpack NWO Hogan. Now, it's the same mold as the other, and unfortunately you can see a little bit of damage to the shoulder joint that my other one doesn't have. But I love this so much. The kind of spray-painted looking tights, the red on the boots, his big gold belt, the head sculpt. There's so much about Toy Biz and their WCW line that I really do adore, and it really comes down to the fact that, kind of like Hasbro, they figured out what are the details that make the wrestler a character. And then they focused on that. They didn't focus on realism. They didn't focus on trying to get the scales appropriate. They want to give you the ultimate version of your mind's eye of a wrestler. And that's what they did. And it helps that I'm just a sucker for Wolfpack Hogan. Or the Wolfpack in general, to be honest. Number 6. Mattel San Diego Comic-Con No Holds Barred RIP. From the Oscar-nominated movie No Holds Barred, this is the SDCC exclusive Ultimate Edition RIP. This is Hulk Hogan's character from No Holds Barred, and you know what? I'm just going to say it. I don't know why he never tried wearing blue. Because look at this, right? Blue works so well for Hogan. It looks so good on him, and I get that yellow and red was what he was iconic with, but like, come on, dude. This would have been such a cool look for him to adopt. Even still, I love this figure. It's incredibly hard to come by at this point. You'd have to pay a good bit of money for it, but I was able to thankfully get mine. That said, he didn't come with a belt. The person who sold it to me made their own belt. I don't question it. I got my RIP. That's all I care about. I love this figure, even though at one point it might have been my number 1. I think it's going to be kind of comfortable sitting at just below the top 5 at this point. All that said, it really is a cool Hogan. You get so many great accessories, and really, it's the blue. It's the blue. Number 5, Jakks TNA Deluxe Impact Hulk Hogan. From TNA Deluxe Aggression, number 5 is kicked off with my TNA Hulk Hogan. Now, I'll be honest, I know Hulk Hogan hurt the company. I know that he left the company in a worse place than he found it. But I'm one of those people who switched over to TNA because of Hulk Hogan. Forgive me, I was a teenager, and at the time, as a teenager, I thought everything TNA was doing was amazing and incredible and spectacular. Looking back on it, the wrestling was good sometimes, but I do have nostalgia for this era of Hogan, and I think this figure in particular has something that none of the other figures on my list do, which is it has a great Hogan old man face. Like Mattel, they try doing old man Hogan faces, that never really works. This one though, he looks so stern and angry. He looks like he's mad, like he just forgot to take his pills in the morning. And it helps that the articulation's actually really solid. You can get a lot of good action poses with this guy. Stuff that you really can't normally get out of even a Mattel, and it helps that Jakks always gave these guys more superhero proportions, which just kind of adds to the dynamicism. Now granted, he has a hard time standing up, and he's also not the most flashy Hogan in the world, like, black pants. But still, I love this Hogan, and I always will. And this is kind of how you know that this was my top 10, is the fact that I bothered to put a TNA Hogan figure on the list, and not even his New Japan look. No, this one, Old Man Hogan, Aces and Eights Hogan, my Hogan. Number 4, Mattel Coliseum Collection Ultimate Edition Hulk Hogan. We are now in my Mount Rushmore of Hogan figures, and the only place to go now has to be the Coliseum Collection Ultimate Edition Hulk Hogan. This is a Hulk Hogan that was made, like the rest of the Coliseum Collection, to be a love letter to the LJN series. And you can see the world title belt is literally the LJN world title. As for the look, these colors, this comes from a Canadian exclusive release, the Black Card series of LJN, with the white shirt, boots, and the red pants and red bandana. Now, sure, there's plenty of Ultimate Edition Hogans at this point. You can get plenty of versions of him in the red and yellow or yellow and red, but this feels so special to me, and it helps that it's this tribute to this long-forgotten series of wrestling figures that really are spectacular, and I hate that people sleep on them. I say that, even though my LJ and Hogan is not even close to touching this list. Number 3, Mattel Ringside Collectibles exclusive Wolfpack Hulk Hogan. In the bronze medal position, we have the Ringside exclusive Hollywood Wolfpack Hogan. Thing is, right? I really wanted to convince myself that this was number 1. It's one of my favorite figures this year. I adore everything about it. I adore the look. I adore the belt. I love all these things. The skin is too pale. I told you, a lot of good figures didn't make the list because the skin's the wrong shade. Well, that's the case here. He's too pale. Here, let me pull up another Hogan. So, if you look, right, that is Hogan. And really, during his NWO days, he was way darker than that. He was going to the booth even more often. So to have this super pale, kind of normal-looking Hogan really demystifies the figure for me. Sure, I still love it, and I'll always love it. I just wish it could have gone higher on the list, because it feels like it could have if it weren't for that one nagging issue that just stares you right in the face. Number 2, Hasbro WWF Hulk Hogan version 2. The WWF Hasbros and the figures inspired by the Hasbros are my favorite toy line ever. Not just wrestling, my favorite toy line ever. Now, I mentioned I had my Hogan embargo. The only line I never had a Hogan embargo for were my Hasbros, because you needed a Hogan there. You really did. This is Hulk Hogan version 2. I know most people prefer version 3, I get it. But I love this. I love the bear hug action. I love how he's showing the 24-inch pythons. I love the facial expression. Look at that. Look how angry he is. I love the shirt underneath. I love everything about this figure. I honestly think this is one of the most slept-on Hasbro figures ever. Hogan had a lot of figures. Some were good, some were bad. It feels like too many people put this one in the bad category, and it just isn't, at least not to me. I love just how dynamic, how unique this Hogan is. There's not another Hasbro that looks like him. And for all those reasons, he's always at the forefront of the collection. He is the main character of this era of wrestling, of the WWF. And I feel like this figure perfectly captures that in so many ways. And you can get a lot of varied poses out of him, something you can't say for most of the Hasbros. So for all those reasons, he's definitely my number 2. And even though I have other Hasbro Hogans that I do enjoy quite a lot, they're never going to hold a candle to this. My number 2, my version 2, and the first Hasbro Hogan I ever got. And not only that, but him alongside my Rick Rude, my Hawk and Animal, my Macho Man, my 2 Ted DiBiase's, and also my Ultimate Warrior. Those were the first Hasbros I ever found. All together, all ready to go. There's a lot of good memories attached to this Hogan. And for all those reasons, he almost made number 1. But he's going to be pretty comfortable here at number 2. Number 1, Mattel Elite 96, Hulk Hogan. At number 1, it has to be the only Hogan I bought multiples of, the Elite 96 War Bonnet Hogan. Just look at the options you have with this figure, all the different looks. So, this is what is advertised, right? A Hogan with some silly gimmicks that they had back in the early 80s. He had his war bonnet, which is literally a Roman helmet with a fist on it. That's his war bonnet. He used that against the Twin Towers. There's also his Hulkster, like, I don't even know what that's supposed to be. It's obviously like a car tag, but it's also supposed to be his dog tag, I guess? But Hulkster, and it's like, I think in real life it was like specifically a California tag. They don't have that detail on here. I don't know if that's like a legal thing or what that could be, but it still really works. Well, let's say you don't want that, right? Well, you also get just his normal 90s red bandana. And oh my god, this is perfect. Like, once again, for a generic Hogan, just a Hogan to have around, this is the most, like, full packaged Hogan I can think of. It's not a specific look, it's not from a specific match, it's not from a specific era. He's wearing the bandana that you saw all the time. He has this wonderful expression. He has so many different hand options, and the skin tone is completely right. It is a perfect Hogan. But let's say you don't want any of those. Let's say you just want him completely naked. Well, look at this. He's one of the only Mattel Hogans to have a proper bald spot. That's right, usually they give him hair, or they paint hair up there. Not this guy. So even naked, he looks great. This Hogan has 3 distinct looks you can get in one package. It is a true 3-in-1 figure, and all 3 of them are amazing. It is the only Hogan, and ultimately one of the only figures I've ever bought in multiples of. I think it is the single best Hulk Hogan in my collection. I think it's one of the best wrestling figures in my collection. I think it's one of the best figures in my collection, period. It is perfect on every level. You have the silly, you have the nostalgic, and you have the cool. If there's only one Hogan I would tell a collector to buy, and you want Mattel figures specifically, it's the 96 Hogan. He has everything you could possibly want, plus more, a great head sculpt, a great skin tone, and a great overall feel for a figure. For all those reasons, this guy has to be my number 1. So there it is, my 400 subscribers special in the bag, and also the first ever wrestling top 10. Overall, I gotta say, out of all the top 10s I've done, this has been my favorite one. I feel like we had the most kind of variety here, and also it was a great chance to talk more about my favorite thing to collect, that being my wrestling figures. I don't know what our next milestone is going to be. I'm leaning towards doing Macho Man, but we'll see. I guess we'll just have to wait to see when we get there, but thank you guys so much for 400 subscribers. Like I said in all these videos, the channel is something that constantly brings me joy, gives me a reason to get out of bed a lot of mornings, and I just love it, man. I love being able to do this and to make people have a few minutes a day where they seem to just be able to sit back and enjoy stuff, you know? So, I'm not going to gush much longer. Thank you guys for following me. Thank you guys for sticking with me. And we'll talk again before too long.